Thank you for joining today's Momentum Metrics for Greater Post-Secondary Success, the fourth in a series of SCORE Institutes exploring sustainable practices to support students to greater achievement during and after the pandemic. I'm Courtney Bell, the Vice President for Strategic Practice at the State Collaborative on Reforming Education. Now, before we begin today, I'd like for us to take a moment of silence for the victims of yesterday's tragedy in Uvalde, Texas. Let us continue to keep this community in our thoughts and prayers. Now, today we're going to focus on ways to support students' post-secondary preparation and success. First, I'll share some Tennessee-specific context related to post-secondary access and success and its connection to the ESSAR plans district submitted last August. And then we're going to hear from Dr. Michael Deuser from Education Strategy Group, a mission-driven organization that works with K-12 education. And today we're going to be focusing on, sorry, just a moment. He's going to provide a brief overview of ESG's momentum metrics, which are a set of 8 indicators predictive of students' post-secondary enrollment and success. And we'll then be joined by 3 leaders who will share their experiences implementing the momentum metrics in their districts. Finally, we'll close out by highlighting some resources we'll share as a follow-up to today's webinar. Earning a post-secondary credential remains an important path to economic security and a choice-filled life. According to Tennessee's state labor data, the earning power of credential holders is significantly higher than that of high school graduates without additional credentials or degrees. On average, college graduates earn 1.5 times more than individuals with just a high school diploma 3 years after graduation. Unfortunately, long-standing post-secondary completion gaps continue to persist in Tennessee. As this chart indicates, Black and Hispanic students continue to graduate from post-secondary at lower rates than white students, and the pandemic has exacerbated the challenge of closing these gaps. The pandemic has also impacted college-going rates of Tennessee students. On Monday, the Tennessee Higher Education Commission released their inaugural Collegegoing in the class of 2021 report. According to this report, college-going for the class of 2021 is 52.8%, down 4 points from the class of 2020, and down 9 points from the class of 2019. College-going has now dropped below the earliest recorded rate by THEC, which was 55.7% in 2009. And as you can see from this chart, male student college-going rates are nearly 15 points below female student rates at 46.5% and 59% respectively. Black and Hispanic students college-going rates trail other student groups as well, with both groups having college-going rates below 50%. Black students' college-going rate is at 44%, Hispanic students' college-going rate is at 35%. And concerningly, the Black-white gap has also widened. In 2019, it was 9.9 points. For the class of 2021, the gap widened to 13.6 points. And the Hispanic white gap has grown from 19.2 points in 2019 to 22.6 points in 2021. Only about 1/3 of Black and Hispanic male students are enrolling in post-secondary after high school, with college-going rates of 37.5% and 29.7% respectively. This sobering data should serve as a call to action to Tennessee's K-12 and higher education leaders, practitioners, and policymakers. We will send out THEC's college-going report as part of a follow-up email to today's webinar and would encourage everyone to review this important report. Summer melt, the phenomenon when a student intending to enroll in post-secondary directly after high school fails to do so, remains an important challenge to address to ensure more students enroll in post-secondary after high school graduation. In an August 2021 report, SCORE found that summer melt affects roughly 40% of Tennessee high school graduates. And this concerning phenomenon is more likely to affect Black, Hispanic, and economically disadvantaged students. Given the challenges of the last 2 years, it is more important than ever to find ways to prevent summer melt and ensure more students seamlessly enroll in post-secondary directly after high school. Next, we're going to look a little bit at Tennessee's ESSAR allocations. So the $3.5 billion in ESSAR funds Tennessee districts have received marks the largest single infusion of federal dollars into the state's K-12 education system. These funds provide districts with the unique opportunity to innovate, to recover and accelerate learning for students who are the most behind academically. To support districts with ESSAR planning decisions, the Tennessee Department of Education created a spending plan template based on 4 focus areas: academics, student readiness, educators, and foundations. Each focus area highlighted allocation areas targeted at teaching and learning improvements. Based on SCOR's analysis of the ESSAR plans Tennessee districts submitted in August, districts on average allocated 26.4% of their ESSAR funds to academics, 10.8% to student readiness, 12.5% to educators, and 50.3% to foundations. Within the student readiness focus area, 1.4% was allocated to high school innovation and 0.6% was allocated to academic advising. So as we focus on this critical transition area, it is important to note that not a lot of funding has been allocated to this area. Now, starting in 2023, the Tennessee Investment in Student Achievement will provide districts with significant additional recurring funding from the state. In addition to creating a more transparent and student-based funding formula, in TISA, Tennessee will invest an additional $1 billion in recurring funding to districts by the time it comes online. We know the last 2 years have presented enormous challenges to preparing students to enroll and succeed in the post-secondary pathway of their choice. However, these last 2 years have also presented us with new opportunities to innovate and accelerate students' post-secondary success. As we move through our agenda today, I would encourage you to consider how the new resources on this slide could help you innovate to better support students' post-secondary access, enrollment, and success. We've briefly touched on ESSAR and TISA, but I also want to highlight 2 other resources to consider as you plan to support students' post-secondary preparation and success. The state has allocated $500 million in non-recurring funding for grants to expand innovative CTE programming to all schools with middle and high school grades. This funding will mean that every high school in the state receives a one-time grant of $1 million and every middle school receives a one-time grant of $500,000. The state has also provided $2.25 million for expanding the number of dual enrollment courses that are fully funded by the state. And this includes courses that are taken at TCATs. This presents an opportunity to strengthen K-12 and higher education partnerships to ensure more students are prepared to access and succeed in post-secondary education. The data I've shared today are just some of the many indications of how the pandemic has interrupted student learning and disrupted pathways to post-secondary. The resources we have available now and in the coming years position us to design a better way forward so that we come out of the pandemic stronger for students than ever before. At this time, I'd like to turn to Dr. Michael Duser from Education Strategy Group. Prior to joining ESG, Dr. Duser served as the Chief of College and Career Success for Chicago Public Schools, where he oversaw school counseling and post-secondary advising, as well as early college, career and technical education, and work-based learning. Michael is going to provide us with a brief overview of ESG's momentum metrics and provide some examples of how districts across the country are implementing them.
Thank you so much, Courtney, and thank you to SCORE for having me this morning. Just want to start off by saying that and affirming that these are some tough times in school districts. Having come out of one recently, I know that. I know the news in Uvalde is heavy on everyone's minds right now. And the presentation that Courtney just shared contains some metrics on student outcomes that are really troubling to all of us who are involved in schools, and especially those of us who are focused on college and career success. So just want to acknowledge the difficulty and also express my excitement and my gratitude for being able to come here and talk today about momentum metrics, because really what they are is an opportunity to turn some of those college going trends around and be able to find some hope and indeed some momentum in these challenging times. So if we could go to the next slide. The momentum metrics started based on some research that we at ESG did fairly recently on student success that turned up some additional troubling information that, especially from an equity standpoint, is something that concerns everyone who's really serious about economic mobility and about equity in education. So we found that there are about 7,000 coin flip high schools where if you're Black, Hispanic, or low income, your chance of going into higher education after high school is less than 50%. So you've got a coin flip's chance of that opportunity to advance your education and advance your economic mobility, which of course it's a huge missed opportunity. About 1 million students will leave high school every year, either unprepared to successfully transition to post-secondary education or training program, or not able to take that next step, whatever it may be. And we know that it was especially difficult for students of color and low-income students during the pandemic, which has really made so much of the post-secondary experience so much more difficult for so many students. So in terms of enrollment, we've seen an 11.4% decrease in undergraduate enrollment for students from high poverty schools. In terms of post-secondary planning, we've seen 50% of Latinx students change their post-secondary plans. Not necessarily for the worse, of course, but it just indicates all of the disruption and the flux that's happening in students' lives. And in FAFSA completion, which is really a gatekeeper for students to be able to afford a post-secondary education, we've seen a decrease of 14.9% in FAFSA completion rates for high school seniors in high minority schools. So really, it's a call to action for all of us who are concerned with post-secondary equity. The good news is that success is possible, and we think that the momentum metrics are a big key to that. What we found is that these are metrics that schools are using. We're really turning some of these unfortunate trends on their heads and enabling students, especially low-income students and students of color, to not just enroll, but succeed in post-secondary. And I'm really excited to share more about them with you. So these are the momentum metrics, and they're grounded in research. And what's exciting about them is that they're all especially predictive of post-secondary success. One of the biggest challenges, I think, in K-12 districts is really getting the institution, and indeed ourselves who operate in these districts, to commit to the idea that the greatest measure of a K-12 district success is how successful students are after they leave us, and how much success they have in post-secondary. And part of the reason that's hard for us is that we feel like we don't control as much of that post-secondary success as we'd like to. And to some extent, that's true, of course. But what's exciting about the momentum metrics is that they tell us what we can focus on while a student is still with us and within our locus of influence to maximize their chances for post-secondary success. So you can see that there are 8 metrics, and they're organized in 3 big buckets: preparing for post-secondary, applying for post-secondary, and enrolling. Preparing is about 9th grade GPA, potential for advanced coursework, and high quality pathway participation. Applying, the 3 metrics to focus on are college applications, FAFSA completion, and college match. And the big 2 for enrollment are seamless enrollment, meaning enrolling in a post-secondary educational experience directly following high school graduation, and gateway course completion in post-secondary. So I spoke a little bit to what the big 3 are in terms of preparing. 9th grade GPA has been shown over a number of years to really significantly predict whether a student graduates from high school. A student who is on track at the end of their 9th grade year is 3.5 times more likely to complete high school on time than a student who isn't, based on the classic research from Chicago. I was in Chicago public schools in the late aughts, when some of the first real applied work around 9th grade on track was really taking off. And it's amazing to see what can happen in terms of impacting that metric when a system focuses and rallies its resources, not just around this measure, but around making sure that students have the supports that they need to succeed when there are troubling signs along the way. Another one is potential for advanced coursework. So we know that when students participate in advanced coursework like AP, NIB, and dual credit and dual enrollment, that they have greater chances of enrolling in college and succeeding in college. And so this is a really important one. And, you know, obviously equity is critical. We want to make sure that all students have access to these kinds of courses. And so we need to be not just approaching access to those courses and eligibility for those courses from an intuitive perspective, but making sure that we're bringing data to bear so that no students sort of fall through the cracks who have the potential to succeed. And then high quality pathway participation. We know that CTE pathways that are aligned to high quality credentials and to in-demand labor pathways are going to give students a greater opportunity, not just for college success, but for career success than other kinds of pathways. And so this is another focus area. And one place that has really shown some excellence with respect to one of these strategies, not just one of these strategies, but one in particular, is San Antonio ISD in terms of potential for advanced coursework. What I wanted to highlight is that they generate customized reports that identify every student with AP potential. And they do that using a specialized PSAT-based report to identify students' likelihood of passing the AP exam for each subject, which is really innovative. And what I wanted to say as well is that I think that might raise, I've heard this idea raise a flag for some folks, thinking that when we talk about using data to identify students with potential, that's another way of gatekeeping and saying only these students can succeed in advanced coursework, which is not the case. What it's really about is making sure that we explicitly identify all students who have a really high likelihood of succeeding, especially students of color who tend to get overlooked, and making sure that they get the attention and encouragement that they need to enroll in this kind of coursework. And that's what San Antonio ISD did. They also produced a school level report card that tracks students with identified potential. They started to also make sure that educators were using reports to scaffold supports for students based on their likelihood of passing the exam, and actually evaluated teachers based on the performance of students conditional on their potential. So a lot of different elements of their strategy, and not every district may want to consider every one of them, but they certainly had a large impact on their outcomes. So over 1/3, 33% of their students participate in AP or dual enrollment courses each semester based on some of their work. The next phase of Momentum Metrics is applying, and this is college applications, FAFSA completion, and college match. So college applications is relatively straightforward, obviously, but many districts have opportunities to improve in terms of how they support college applications and how they track college applications. So, you know, obviously you can't go to college if you don't apply. And so it's very important to have systems in place, not just to measure college applications in retrospect, but to measure college applications in real time so that you can understand as the college application calendar sort of proceeds during each school year, are the students getting supports they need? Are we noticing students who aren't applying who really ought to be? Or are we noticing students who aren't applying to maybe enough colleges to give themselves the best possible chance to be admitted and to enroll? FAFSA completion, of course, is about the federal application for free student aid, or the free application for federal student aid. I always get that confused. And it's really what is the gatekeeper to students having the money necessary to pay for post-secondary education. And so this is another huge thing to track, not just in retrospect, but in real time. And then lastly, college match. So this is a measure that different districts define in different ways, but it's a way of making sure that students are applying to schools where they have quantitatively the greatest chances of graduating, persisting and graduating. So, you know, not every school is equal for a particular student when it comes to, are they going to have the experience and the supports that they need to not just enroll, but to persist and succeed. And so this is an important measure to put in the hands of counselors and other folks who are interacting directly with students to make sure that students have that insight into, based on the numbers, where are you most likely to earn this credential and move on to career. One district that's done a great job with this is the District of Columbia Public Schools. They developed a data dashboard that really helped everyone key in on key milestones and define smart college choice as well. So this is what I was referring to in terms of college match. how they incorporated institutions that met benchmarks for graduation rates to emphasize students, being able to consider those colleges in particular during the application process. They also are leveraging evaluation, in this case of principals, based on the percentage of college-bound seniors who've submitted at least one college application, which is, again, a typical and very important data point for college applications. Another one is 3 or more college applications, for instance, or number of students with at least one college match, or what DCPS might call a smart college choice application. And then they're investing in college and career coordinators at every high school as well. So between 2010 and 2018, DCPS was able to increase their college enrollment rate by 11 percentage points. So, very impressive progress in less than a decade. So just another example of what's possible. The last phase of the momentum metrics are enrolling, and this is seamless enrollment and/or military directly following high school. And this is important because we know that students who enroll directly following high school are much more likely to graduate from college than students who wait. Some of them never wind up. Really involved with partner higher education institutions, but it's also one of the very most high leverage metrics to track, because we know that so many students who graduate from high school get stuck in college in remedial coursework and don't go on to sort of earn credits in credit bearing coursework. So, again, there are different ways to define this metric, but students who complete their gateway courses and earn credit during that first year are far more likely to succeed in post-secondary. Another district that has shown some promising practice with respect to this is the NYC Department of Education and their partnership with CUNY. They've got a program called CUNY College and Career Bridge for All, which is really focused on making sure that after graduation, enrollment really happens. Students who are enrolled in this program enroll in college at 11% higher rate than those who don't participate compared with the NYC DOE average. And this is a program that really focuses on setting a set of milestones along the transition from high school to college and providing support with respect to those milestones, hiring and training college students to make sure that they're providing advising to students during that transitional period, and making sure that students have the right kinds of connections to dual enrollment and academic bridge courses as well. So you can see here a laundry list really of recommendations for school district leaders, including adopting these as core measures of success, convening cross-sector leaders to review data and plan for improvement, set goals for improvement, etc. What this is really about is making sure that we're building systems around what it takes for students to be successful in post-secondary, and making sure that we have the metrics to measure their progress along the way towards success in post-secondary. So really making post-secondary not just ancillary to the K-12 mission, but putting it really at the center of goal setting and of practice. So we're interested in hearing your feedback, and interested in hearing which of the momentum metrics you're most interested in implementing during the upcoming school year and or beyond. So a poll should be coming up for you all here. I have it on my screen. I hope you do too. We'd love to see your responses and get a sense of where folks' heads are in terms of where they'd like to put their focus.
And Michael, this is Courtney. There was one question in the chat box while folks are filling out this poll. I believe it was around DC, who was focused on college applications, wondering if that initiative has any data on college completion yet. I'm not sure if it's too soon to see that or not.
I'm sorry, which initiative specifically?
DC's focus on getting more students to complete college applications. Has that resulted in an uptick in the college completion rate for those students as well?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'm happy to follow up with our partners in DC and get more data on that. And it may be too early, but it's too early for me to say that.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so we've got some poll results. It looks like this. I don't know if you all can see this, so I'll read it out. 9th grade GPA, 27% of you are interested, and that's consistent with what we've seen in districts that we work with in the Momentum Metrics Network as well, is that 9th grade GPA is the most common area of focus. It's so closely connected to what every district is concerned about. Next, 23% potential for advanced coursework, which is great to see, and 23% for high quality pathway participation as well. We also see that, and this is another thing that's consistent with what we've seen so far in our work in the Momentum Metrics networks, that, you know, yes, all of these are important, but districts tend to be less interested in or able to focus on some of the data points that come later on in the high school journey and closer to the transition to post-secondary. So we see 4% focused on college applications, 4% on FAFSA completion, 4% on college match, and 15% on seamless enrollment.
Wonderful. And it looks like there is one more question. Can you see that, Michael, in the?
I can see that. And the question is, I'm just going to read it. There are some questions in the literature on these topics regarding the economic impact of college completion on employment and employment levels requiring the degree earned. Is there data to support our general notion that college completion does result in lifetime earning career progression? Long story short, the answer is yes. On average, college education and for post-secondary education in general is associated with a considerable annual wage premium. And that wage premium is higher in some degree fields than others, in the STEM fields, for instance, and it's comparatively lower in some of the more humanities-oriented fields, like my English major, for instance. But there's a well-established literature on the economic impact of post-secondary attainment.
And Dr. Vanistal, I can add in Tennessee specifically, when we look at actual data from Tennessee students, we see about a 1.5 times wage premium. So students who earn some type of post-secondary credential are earning on average 1.5 times more than their peers who just completed high school 3 years, and that's 3 years after graduation. So definitely true in Tennessee.
Now, one thing I do want to say, we do want to consider multiple pathways for students, right? So just because there's a wage premium on average doesn't mean that every single student who attends college is going to see a positive return on investment. And that's part of the reason why it's really important in post-secondary advising to identify what kind of post-secondary education is going to be appropriate for that student. How can you make sure that the student has the money they need to pay for that education? And to think about what their likelihood of actually graduating from whatever sort of post-secondary program they enter into actually is, so that there are economic opportunities waiting for them on the other side, and so that they don't find themselves in debt without the ability to repay that debt. So I think, yes, post-secondary education is a winning bet on average, and we need to be very mindful about how we advise students to pursue it. Courtney, should I go ahead and take a couple of these other questions as well?
I would say let's hold on those and go ahead and get to Dr. Raff, but we'll keep these up for the Q&A at the end.
Okay, that sounds great. So we will get to those questions at the end, like we said. In the meantime, I would love to turn our attention to a conversation with Dr. Jeremy Raff, who's the coordinator of college and career services at the District of Lancaster in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, so again, my name is Jeremy Raff. I'm the coordinator of college and career services at School District of Lancaster. And I think you can go to the next slide there. So a little bit about School District of Lancaster on the next slide. We are a district located in central Pennsylvania. We have about 10,000 students, and we are a majority low-income district. So we have our city about 60,000 people. We have about 85% of students receive free or reduced lunch population. We are one of those high minority schools in our district, and we are one of those coin flip schools as well. We have a majority Hispanic student population and a real significant number of refugee students. So we have, at least a couple years ago, we had the highest number of refugees per capita in the country. So we have a lot of refugees in our school and our community, it creates a really interesting dynamic around post-secondary advising. So as part of my role, I direct partnerships, oversee some staff who work with our counselors to ensure students get the advising support they need, and then kind of set some of the strategy for our district's work around college and career readiness. So, all those momentum metrics, those are great. We've kind of tried to do that work as well. I will certainly say for other districts that are on the call, the pandemic has just really killed a lot of these efforts. I know for us, I recall in 2020, I think it was the week before everything shut down, I was in Chicago for the National Postsecondary Strategy Institute. We had created a district plan around setting some metrics to really boost post-secondary engagement and enrollment and success. And the last 2 years since that, it's been very hard to implement some of those things just because the pandemic has been so overwhelming. So know that, this is hard work, it's long work, but it is important work to do. But it is kind of taking it day by day, I will say. So on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about summer melt. So we recognized that summer melt was a significant issue for us, affecting we had about a 25% summer melt rate, which is where students in the fall, in the end of school year, they say, I'm going to college. And then in the fall, they don't actually follow through on that. So that's concern for us because we had invested a lot of time and energy into those students. That was their post-graduation dream and goal. And sometimes, that was a little more solidified than others, but we want to make sure they're able to succeed in that. And we know MELT is much more likely for those low income and first generation students. And those students are then taking themselves out of those potential economic benefits in the long term and kind of continues to perpetuate some of that income inequality. You can do the next slide. So the process we went about, first, we started by engaging our internal and external stakeholders. So really talking with our counselors, our advisors, and our college partners to see, what are the gaps here? And certainly a gap we saw is in the summer months, we don't have a lot of schools, they don't have staff available for that. So we have now our Future Ready Center staff who I supervise. They're there and they work with our students who just graduated to support them in the summer, doing FAFSA verifications, helping them complete applications if they haven't done that, doing everything they need to do. And the second step was really reviewing the available research. Summer melt research is relatively new in probably the past 15 years, but there's a really good kind of community of researchers around that. I would definitely recommend any research by Castleman and Page. It's really just shown a lot about melt. Some of the drivers from that, with those are financial, some of those being just other kind of structural barriers in place. So getting a better understanding of the landscape and what could make an impact. And then we decided to look at our data directly. So because we wanted to be predictive in what we were doing, similar to those momentum metrics. So we compiled our data and we partnered with one of our local colleges, Franklin and Marshall College, and their Center for Opinion Research. And we created a statistical model that predicts the likelihood that a student is going to experience summer melt. So we found, and these aren't surprising, the drivers being FAFSA completion, cumulative GPA, and attendance rate. And while these might be kind of no-brainers, it really was helpful in understanding our work. So we had students that we said, okay, this student's done a FAFSA, they've applied, they've confirmed enrollment, but they're showing like a 40% chance that they're going to actually show up in the fall. Why is that? And looking under the hood, it's, well, this student shows up at high school about 70% of the time. So if they're not showing up for high school, are they really going to show up for college? And that leads to conversations with that student about, hey, what are some of the things we need to change kind of in your approach that's maybe going to be an issue of you actually enrolling or being successful. So that's never a student-facing metric, but is a kind of advisor-facing metric that we use. And then we utilize that information to really drive our spring and summer intervention work, which I can outline on the next slide here. So the next slide kind of shows, we really prioritize our district's efforts around FAFSA completion and communicating that out to our internal stakeholders. So on the right-hand side, you'll see there's a FAFSA dashboard that we put out on a weekly basis. and we share out the list of students who have completed the FAFSA and completed our state grant application. And we send that to all the high school counselors, so they know if that student has or has not completed that. And then we track that by subgroup and kind of set some goals around that. And we're happy with some of the results we've seen, kind of despite kind of the national environment. And then we provide those counselors and advisors with the likelihood of fall enrollment, so they can have those conversations with students. Never saying, we're never saying, hey, we think you have a 20% chance of falling through on this, but kind of talking around, okay, there's some things that you might be barriers that we need to have conversations around, some practices you might need to change kind of moving forward. And then we use that predictive model to really prioritize our outreach and create different resources. So in the summer, my staff that works year round will conduct outreach, really prioritizing the students who you'll see on the left here are in yellow or red, who have a lower likelihood of following up with them more intensely to ensure they have the support needed. Maybe they haven't done the FAFSA, maybe they haven't followed through on confirming a spot. Making sure, we're following up with them first, and then keeping track, are they completing those key summer tasks they need to do to be successful? So we've developed some resources in partnership with our local colleges, really detailed checklists for all our local college partners of what a student needs to do for each school in the summer to matriculate successfully. And then our last slide, we feel like we've had some successes with this, but the pandemic has really been difficult with that. So we saw reduction in summer melt rates prior to the pandemic, and then the pandemic has kind of shot that. We've seen a real reduction in students going to post-secondary, just like Tennessee, which has made that more difficult. So we have seen an impact, but it's been a little harder to see. We've got to kind of compare it to national rates instead of how things were before. We do see more students graduating with stronger post-graduation plans, just by us being intentional about trying to finalize that information around FAFSA completion, college enrollment. And then finally, we've seen an increase in FAFSA completion rates. Now, our completion rate is too low to begin with. So, we're certainly starting from a low starting point. But I think one thing I'm most proud of is that last year, despite a 5% decrease nationally in FAFSA completion, we actually saw a 3% increase. And that came from that really regular communication out about our FAFSA data, communication with students, and being really intentional about putting that in place and getting that support.
Thank you so much, Dr. Raff, for sharing. It's great to see such wonderful work in Lancaster. My apologies for saying Lancaster before. I'll bet you get that a lot. Sorry about that. We'd love to learn a little bit more about your work around the momentum metrics, and I would encourage folks to submit questions on the Q&A as well. But I might start the questioning a little bit with asking you, for districts who are thinking about how to get started with this work, but they're not quite sure where to start, feels a little bit overwhelmed. You mentioned how overwhelming these past couple of years have been. Where would you recommend they start?
I certainly think we found FAFSA to be a helpful piece because it's, at least in Pennsylvania, we have access to U.S. Department of Education data of student level FAFSA completion data. And I believe that typically goes through State Department of Education, so we can access that. So we feel like we have access to that data in a pretty easy way where we can regularly update that and we can communicate that out. And we've just seen that, I think as well, expanding the focus, we really expanded beyond just college to be post-secondary. So we have a lot of students say, well, I'm not going to go to college, so I don't need to do the FAFSA. Like, oh, well, what do you want to do? Well, I want to go to barber school. Well, you know that this will pay for that too. So I think expanding their understanding of FAFSA is not just for a 4-year college, it's for that training program you might want to do that, that program takes federal aid. So that's been really helpful for us. I think has been a spot where we feel we can move the needle. I do think that 9th grade GPA piece is critical. That's something that we have tried to hit with limited success. We have much more successfully done the advanced coursework piece. So really targeted this past year, just interviewing a lot of students. And this wasn't work I was directly involved in, but so many students that are graduating and don't know what is offered at the high school level. So making sure they just know what advanced courses are available, because so many times they were just going off of what they knew, and maybe a parent was saying you should take AP, you should take IB, and we saw some real equity gaps where our white students were the ones taking those courses, and while they were the minority of the high school, they were taking kind of the lion's share of those. So we've been able to move the needle pretty quickly on that, I think, just by being intentional around course selection and exposure to opportunities, because the opportunities are there. It's just a matter of sharing with it and being intentional about that course selection process and who's getting into those slots.
Got it. Thank you. It sounds like you've been moving the needle in a lot of areas. I was going to zero in for a moment on FAFSA completion, which, as you saw in the polls, was, those applying metrics were far lower in terms of where districts wanted to put their focus than some of the preparing metrics, which is where a lot of the bulk of the focus was. Looks like you had focus in both of those, and we're really pushing and supporting the district and elevating its practice in those areas. How did you do that, especially in the context where it can be difficult sometimes to get districts to focus in areas where they're not accustomed to focusing? How did you build that buy-in from districts, leaders down to counselors to support the kinds of changes you were advocating for?
Yeah, it certainly took time, I think, building trust with counselors. So my role was a new role that the district created several years ago. Our superintendent saw a need for kind of a central office vision to kind of push things forward. So it took time and to build those relationships with counselors throughout the district and school leaders. And I think part of why we've been able to have so much success recently is we have really strong relationships with the principals who are really bought into that work. So in the past, that wasn't always the case, but currently they're all about this, and they've seen how that impact can be beneficial. So we have found that, and I think making it anytime, I've tried to approach my role as I just want to make your job as easy as possible. So if I can take things off your plate and I can provide you with the data on these students and where they're at and reminders, that can be beneficial. One thing that the pandemic actually did help was it did provide a little extra capacity to do things like we did a FAFSA blitz where we called every single senior in the district, and which, we're not a huge district, but that was still 800 students, and called them about setting up a FAFSA appointment. We could only do that because we were virtual and we were, had a little more flexibility with office staff and with our counselors to be able to do that. And we had central office folks volunteer their time to do that as well. So I think people seeing that this is a group effort has been really helpful. And it helps to have a district superintendent who's really on board with this and is willing to speak about it and push it as being important.
Fantastic. So you got that combination of executive sponsorship and coming to folks with the idea of support and not just expectations. Sounds impressive. Okay, one more question, at least one more question. We have a question from the audience that says, thank you for sharing this valuable experience. What supports have been included in the school building / school day? Or do most students seek supports at the center you mentioned?
Yeah, so we have kind of two different routes. We have a college and career readiness curriculum that's embedded through the district K through 12. So that has definitely been a piece of it. There's some room for improvement certainly there, but we've seen some benefits from that in ensuring students are getting the information they need. And then the Future Ready Center staff that I oversee is kind of currently is more based on referral and students self-selecting for that. However, they meet with about 60 to 70% of seniors every year. And the ones they don't is primarily they're working in alternative ed with kind of different staff we work with. So we do find that that's pretty successful. And they go out and they speak in classrooms to every single class, every single homeroom throughout the year. So they're able to get that information out. So we've kind of embedded that in those ways, and then have staff in place year round who can provide that support for those students as they need it.
Got it. Thank you. All right. One final question from the audience in the chat. As we consider who is being most impacted by practices in the school district, are there some interesting patterns emerging in the disaggregated data by socioeconomic status, race, or educational attainment of parents?
Yes. So we have certainly seen that. We previously had a district Gear Up grant, and kind of during that work, we were able to really kind of eliminate some of those equity gaps, and some of those have returned since the pandemic. We've really kind of looked at the data to see how can we drive, especially like English language learners. And so we definitely see some differences. We have our African-American students, especially African-American male students. Like when we looked at that slide, the Tennessee's data, ours is similar in that. We still see our FAFSA completion rate is higher for our higher income families than our lower income families, even though it kind of doesn't really make sense. So we know we're seeing an impact in some of those increases, but we know there's more work to be done. And unfortunately, those populations are the ones who have been most hit by the pandemic. They're the most likely to go to two-year schools. Our four-year college enrollment has not changed since COVID. It's been flat. Our two-year enrollment has basically cut in half. So our number of students going to our local community college went from 100 to 40. So for a variety of factors, cost, it was entirely online. They didn't want to do online after having a bad experience in high school. So I think a lot of factors have driven that. So we've definitely, I think the pandemic has made those even more obvious. And those are the populations we're really trying to drive with this. So we've seen boosts there, certainly.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Raff, for your time today and for the work that you're doing. We tremendously appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, now I'd like to turn this back over to Courtney to introduce two Tennessee leaders who are part of the Momentum Metrics Network, which I mentioned earlier, and have been doing some truly fantastic work around the Momentum Metrics and college and career readiness in general. They'll talk a little bit about the work that they've done and how they plan to sustain it in the future. So Courtney, back to you.
Thanks, Michael. And thank you so much again to Dr. Raff. Really interesting to hear how others across the country are struggling with some of the same issues that we face here in Tennessee. So as Michael mentioned, I'm excited to introduce two Tennessee leaders who have been very deeply engaged in implementing the Momentum Metrics for the first time this year. And after each leader shares a little bit about their experience with the Momentum Metrics, we will have time for a few minutes of question and answer. So we are going to be joined by Dr. Shanda Dowdy, who is the Director of Curriculum and Instruction for grades 9 through 12 in Clarksville-Montgomery County Schools, as well as LaTanya Jackson, who is the Director of Secondary and Career and Technical Education for Lauderdale County Schools. So Shanda, welcome. We are going to start with you.
Thank you so much, Courtney, and thank you for letting me be part of this panel today. So I'm really excited to talk about the work that Clarksville-Montgomery County Schools and our teachers have been doing to assist students. And we picked 4 of the priority areas for our district from Momentum Metrics. We picked 9th grade on track. Much like most of you, the pandemic has definitely hit both student motivation and academic achievement, and we feel like that's the best place to target it. And then we were also looking very closely at our seniors and where they're going after high school. So we selected FAFSA completion, college match, and seamless enrollment. We used the Momentum Metrics self-reflection data as a huge framework for beginning this work. We found that to be something that really gave us an opportunity to sit down and reflect on the work we're doing, what our vision and goals are, and where we want to be. And so that data was very helpful to us. We also used our strategic work and our plan for our district and priority areas based on data in our district. So as we move to the next slide, our vision for our students, much like all of us, I'm sure, we focus on making sure our students graduate college and career ready. And again, that self-reflection piece of the Momentum Metrics helped us to realize that we didn't have a great systemic process for this in place. And so that's really where we started as a team. Our first initiative was focusing again on all 3 of those areas, and we provided a stipend to one person in each of our high schools to serve as a college and career readiness coordinator. It was a variety of people throughout each building. The principals were allowed to select someone. So in some buildings, it might have been a librarian. In another building, it might have been a counselor. So it was very interesting to see who emerged as the leader of this work within each building. That person was responsible for a variety of things at each school, but just to highlight a few of those things, they were responsible for hosting a stop drop in FAFSA event, a daytime and nighttime event for parents to come and get help with their FAFSA completion. They also made sure that every senior had the opportunity to complete the senior survey, which we used that data in a variety of ways that I'll talk about in just a few minutes. And that was new for our district. They hosted college and career application events, coordinated attendance at the CMCSS Senior Hiring Expo, the TCAT signing day, and then they also gave personal invitations to each of our students who are most at risk in transitioning to college, to invite them to summer bridge events that are taking place here in our community. Some of the really positive results that we have to share, which are on the next slide as we proceed. We were able to use our senior survey data against the first time we've done this district-wide, for purpose of example, to find 50 students at one post-secondary partner who said, yes, I want to go here, but no, I haven't done anything to make that happen. And so with our Greater Together partnership that we have with our post-secondary partners in our community, I was able to quickly send those names and contact information to that post-secondary partner and say, can you help me and reach out to these kiddos? And so they were immediately able to contact the kids and set up somebody to come into the building to meet with those students to assist them. And another post-secondary partner, it was 57 students. So I felt really positive right there that 107 students who had said, yes, I want to go. It was the questions were worded very interestingly. It said, you know, do you want to go to college? Yes. Have you completed an application? No. Have you been accepted, confirmed in minutes? No. What is your next step? And the kids would write in the blank. They would say, I really need to apply. And so it just gave us an opportunity to get that college career readiness coordinator and that post-secondary partner meeting with that kid, because they clearly identified themselves as most at-risk students in our buildings. Also, we were able to invite 554 seniors to a senior hiring expo that included military recruiters. That's a big part of our community. We do have a large Army base here. And so we have a lot of, again, there were about 75 kids who said, I want to join the military, but I haven't met with a recruiter yet. And so that gave us an opportunity to connect those kids with a recruiter so that they have the opportunity to pursue whatever their dreams are. By the end of all of that gathering of data from our senior survey, we were able to confidently say 86% of our seniors are graduating and they have completed at least one college or career application. Prior to this year, we had that vision saying, yes, we want our kids to be college or career ready, but we had no data to put with it. And so now we have a data point and we can continue to grow from there. Of course, our goal is going to be that 100% of our kids get there, but for our first year, we felt really positive about that. Also, it's been interesting working with seniors who are graduating and going on trying to get them to enroll in summer bridge programs. Enrollment in one program has tripled this year and enrollment in another has doubled, but kids still have several weeks to sign up. And so we feel positive that we're going to get that number up prior to that enrollment deadline. So these are just a few of our positive results. We also saw an increase in FAFSA completion. Again, it wasn't where we had set our goal to be, so not something that I'm super positive about yet, but we did see an increase. And so again, coming off the pandemic, we feel really positive that we can continue to increase that number. So we're up to about 70%. We expect that by June 1st to be around 72 to 75%. So positive results there as well. Moving on, one of the questions I was asked to talk about were some of the challenges. One of the biggest challenges were that we started in January, and it felt like we were giving a lot of tasks out and trying to create a systemic process in the middle of the year. And so in a lot of ways, it felt like we were building the plane in flight. I came into this role from being a principal, and so I was learning a lot myself, and at the same time trying to encourage people and help them understand why this work was really important important and given real world examples of our students and how their work was making a difference. You know, another big challenge is just fidelity of implementation. You're throwing things at people in January, you know it's important, they know it's important, but there are a lot of other things going on. And so those are really the big challenges that that we faced with the implementation of our work in the momentum metrics. In regards to sustainability, which is the next slide that I have, we are looking for funding, giving the college and career readiness coordinators just a nominal stipend for that extra work that they're having to do to plan events and assist and coordinate these types of things really gave them the extra momentum to get things done and to focus on the task at hand, and rewarded them for the work that they were doing after hours and before school to make these things happen. So we're writing grants and looking for internal funding sources to continue to supplement that work in each building, because the results are positive and really make a difference. Also, we're creating a solid plan for fidelity. We've already rolled out a calendar of events for next year that starts in August. We're really excited about that. And so we'll have events every month, and giving our coordinators that calendar now, showing them what we're going to be doing in August, September, October, November. They were so excited. I was concerned they might be a little overwhelmed by it, but they weren't. They were so thrilled to see all the things spread out over the year, and everything they need is on the calendar. So it's just click and here's what you need. So really, really exciting to be able to have that in place to help support that work. And then data-driven decision-making is another piece of our sustainability plan. So now we have baseline data really for each school for all of these things. And so even in our last CCR meeting, some of our coordinators were saying, I'm going to do better than that next year. I get it now. And so them seeing their data, being able to reflect on their data in comparison to other schools and in comparison to the district has really come a talking point to help motivate all of us to make sure we're doing the right work for all students. And so that's just really it, focusing on what's best for all students. Our other innovation pilot as part of our momentum metrics work has been creating an early warning system for 9th grade students. We had already started researching a variety of ways to make this happen, and we selected or purchased Panorama for data tracking purposes to use with our 9th grade students. We're currently in the last phase of data integration. We have a meeting this week and hopefully that will be completed. And our goal there is that our teachers will have a one-stop shop for all of our 9th grade students so they can quickly see everything involving that kid. And we're even tracking it back through 5th grade so we can get a really good picture of these kids through the pandemic even, and know kind of where they were, where they've been, and then where we're going to take them as they proceed through high school. Prior to this, all we had was, all a teacher could see would be this year's grades and this year's attendance. So we're really excited about that and excited to roll that out in the beginning of next year. Our sustainability plan for that is we're hoping to create a district-wide data warehouse and to have that in our budget for creation over the next 2 years. We're looking really to hopefully start that next year in August to start the building process. So we'll build from that panorama for 9th grade to ensure includes all of our students by the time that we're done. Some advice I would give other people on the next slide. The first piece of advice is just do it. This was laid on my desk and with, you know, what do you think about this? And I was like, let's go for it. And so I would say just do it, because the data that we gleaned from the self-reflection alone, and when we did the self-reflection, I didn't even realize what we were going to have the opportunity to build from there. I thought we were just reflecting. And so just the opportunity to reflect alone really helped me to know where my work needed to be and where our schools and kids needed help. And so from there, we've been able to help, which has been amazing. Just also ensure that you have the support of your senior leadership team and your director. I'm not that high on the list here, but having that support, and I know that the gentleman from Pennsylvania also referenced that really does make a difference in in making things happen and rolling that out and having people talk about things, and also clarify the roles of the team members to ensure that everybody on the team understands their role and how they're going to assist assist with implementation. Along the way, we added some people. Along the way, I added our lead high school counselor. She wasn't originally on the team, didn't even get to participate in the self-reflection, which was so powerful. But I realized I'm going to need some extra help here. And she has that background with FAFSA and working with counselors and how to get kids to complete it. So just, making sure that you have the right people in the right seats to keep the plane afloat once you're building it in the air. So definitely something I would do again. And I would encourage for all people to do this as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Doty. We are going to invite LaTanya to turn on her camera at this point as well, but I just want to reiterate the work in Clarksville is really important work, and I liked that someone had commented in the comments that it feels really practical and doable, and I think themes that I heard throughout your presentation were purposeful planning. So really making the time to reflect, to look at the data you have, to figure out what data you don't have, and also strategic allocation of resources, particularly as you think about people. This is relationship work, this is people work. And so making sure that you are creating space for people to own this work, I think is really important. So we'll have Shanda join us again after LaTanya presents to answer some questions. So if you have questions for her, please continue to drop those in the chat. And with that, I will invite LaTanya to share about the work that she's leading in Lauderdale County. So thank you, LaTanya.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And I'm excited as well about our work in Lauderdale County with momentum metrics this year. If you would just go to the next slide, I'm going to talk just a little about our journey with momentum metrics. We began with our self-reflection, our assessment of where our programs are, what we were doing well, what gaps and opportunities we had for growth, and then what were some of our root causes and our needs that needed to be addressed with our self-reflection. And I would just like to say in our self-reflection, it was very important for us to be open, honest, and transparent. And fortunately for us here in Lauderdale County, we had our superintendent as well as our assistant superintendent and our principals from both high schools in with our reflection and with our continued work through momentum metrics. So that made our work just so much better because we were getting that support from our head leadership team. And that just made it just great. And so one of the things when we began our self-reflection was that we had to be honest, just say, what are we doing well? What are our real needs? What are our real gaps? Are we actually reaching every student? So what we found is that we were doing a lot of great things. We were given a lot of great opportunities for students. We had dual enrollment opportunities, dual credit, advanced placement, work-based learning, advisement. In each high school, we had advisory periods. In each high school, our students were earning industry certifications. So we were doing a lot of things very well as far as offering those opportunities. But what we found in being open, honest, and transparent is that we didn't really have a targeted plan to meet specific needs or to meet underrepresented students who were students of color or students of low income, which actually the low income part does affect most of our districts. So we were targeting that part, but we weren't actually targeting underrepresented groups. So those were some of the things we were honest about. What we're doing it well, we have all of these opportunities, but we're just kind of presenting it to all. And, we're throwing that hook in the water and whichever fish grabs it, that's what we catch. So that's what we wanted to identify, those needs. Those are some of our needs and some of the root causes to those needs. We had our coach, Kayla Rickles, she came in to help us utilize the insights from our self-reflection, along with some other data pieces and surveys that were given out to our parents and teachers and also students. And then we began to put a plan in action for our journey with momentum metrics and helping us to fulfill our needs for post-secondary success. So on that next slide, the 4 components that momentum metrics had for that self-reflection were leadership and vision, which fell under the leadership, vision, communications, and engagement. And then we had programs and policies. That was the advising programs and interventions. And then staff capacity and partnership was under the staffing, professional development and training, and partnerships. And then also our data use and capacity. How are we using our data in our district? And that was one area that we wanted to really look at, because we were having to go in many different directions to many different places to find our data. And now with our work through momentum metrics, we're looking for systems where all of our data can be housed in one place, so that if the superintendent needs it, the director of finance needs it, director of middle school needs it, anyone that needs the data, they can go to a central location and find data. And that we could also utilize that data to better plan for our for the future of our students. On the next slide. So in our self-reflection, we identified our priorities based on our self-assessment. So our 3 priorities that we focused on from the momentum metrics are 9th grade GPA, potential for advanced coursework, and our seamless enrollment. With our 9th grade GPA, we are targeting having an early and targeted intervention to reduce off-track students in 9th grade. We are working in the summer because our focus is on our rising 9th graders. So we're focusing on identifying what those metrics are, what those targets are, how we will identify who is actually off track. And so then we're going to put in early and targeted intervention plans during our school day. So we have within our school day what we call a skinny block. So those students will begin to receive targeted interventions during that skinny block based off of their individual need. Then we will use our Ames Web data and also data from our EOC and all of these data to place these students with those targeted interventions. Also with our 9th grade, we are this summer, beginning next week actually, we have a summer bridge program. And in our summer bridge program for our students will have opportunities to meet their advisor. All of our students will have an advisor that follows them throughout their 4 years of high school. So our students will meet those advisors next week. They have a 3-day summer bridge program, and this is our rising 9th graders. So they're currently our 8th grade students. They will go to the high school on next week. Transportation has been provided by our district. The district is covering some of the cost of student pay, along with some supports that we receive from SCORE as well. And we're going to have this camp in place. So we have inspirational speakers coming in on those days. All students will be with their elective focus. They have a mini CTE camp that's incorporated within the summer program. So those students who chose health science, advanced manufacturing, information technology, no matter what program of study they have chosen, they will spend the day in those programs doing activities within those programs. Also, one day, they will do a 5-year plan with their advisor. So there's, again, connecting with that advisor that they will have throughout their high school career. Also, one day we will have clubs. They will get a chance to see all the clubs that's offered in high school, what they would like to participate in. And then we'll have a student panel that will take place in our theater at one school, in our gym in another school. But we'll have students that are currently high school students, students who have graduated, that will be sitting on a panel answering questions from those students, and also sharing with students what they wish they had known as they entered 9th grade. And so those students will just share with our students that are still here. And then we will also have college and career fairs based on our THEC data and our THEC report. We're going to use the colleges that most of our students attend, and they will be here on next week. It's not going to be as large as our career fair that we have in the fall with our seniors and juniors, but we will have our colleges that most of our students attend, along with many of our local businesses and manufacturers who will also be here. So that's just a part of just bringing those 9th graders into that culture, bringing those 8th graders into the culture of the high school and getting them better prepared for their high school course. Then our increased conversion of students that showcase potential to successful completion of at least one advanced course. Students who are more than capable of taking advanced placement courses are not taking those courses for several reasons. Some because of the fear of the rigor of the course, and some because of what they feel they may lose as far as their graduation distinction. So if they're afraid if they drop their GPA, they may also have some, they won't get that recognition at graduation that they would normally get. So what we have discussed with that, instead of having an opt-in to taking these advanced courses, we're going to utilize the data, and we're going to place students in, those students that's entering into high school and throughout the high school, we're going to place them in advanced placement coursework and have an opt-out system rather than an opt-in. So that will increase our numbers because they're more than capable. We know that they're ready for it. And so give them those opportunities to see what that course is like and then opt out rather than opt into those courses. And then also our seamless enrollment. And although we stated that we have a commitment to students assessing post-secondary plans and they're economical and viable for themselves and the community. However, we needed to commit to the time and resources to make these things possible. And some of the things that we've already committed to, we've already began to input our data and analyze our National Student Clearinghouse. And for our student tracker data, implement accountability and consistency training for our staff, and implement senior exit surveys that all of our seniors take as part now of their graduation. And in that next slide, for sustainability, our summer bridge program that I've just discussed about our 9th grade students, our professional development around secondary and post-secondary to all middle and high school student teachers. So we want to bring in this summer our middle school teachers as we enter into the school year, having our middle and high school teachers knowing not only the requirements for high school, but what's needed after high school as well. Advisory schedule change to allow more coaching by teachers. Last year, we had a 20-minute advisory session. This year, we're making that a 45-minute advisory session that we're having one day. We're going to start off one day per week so that there is more time to really dig in and do coaching rather than just advising. And then our exit surveys as part of graduation requirements for seniors, enrollment and continued use of our National Student Clearinghouse, in addition of a college and career coordinator position. And that's again, one of those things that it was just great to have our superintendent as part of this group because he was able to see the need for this position because we're requiring more, and just having someone that could focus on this, that could look at it every day as being their main responsibility And it's just been great to have him on that team as we have done this work. And also through this work, we have implemented a middle college for our students who will start in the fall with Dyersburg State, who will also earn their associate's degree in general studies along with their high school diploma. So we have our first 25 in that cohort. So that has also been a part of the work that we have been doing with Momentum Metrics. So we're very excited about it. I know our time was cut short, so I'm trying to rush through it. But we've done a lot of great things, and we're excited.
Yeah, I loved that idea of allowing students to opt out and not asking them to opt in. I think that's really important, that we are putting as much on our students as possible to say, we think you can do this, and not just having opportunities present, but really coaching them into those opportunities that we know they're capable of. And I heard some of the same themes that Dr. Doty shared around the purposeful planning, the commitment of leaders, and then thinking about how do you create positions that are specifically focused on this. So really exciting to see the big things happening in Lauderdale County, and really appreciate you sharing. And I know we are at time, but I'm going to take a personal privilege here and ask a couple of really quick questions from the Q&A that I think are really important, and we'll try to get wrapped up in just a couple of minutes. But one question specifically for you, Shanda, someone had asked about what data points you're using from Panorama. So I wonder if you can speak about that.
Yes, I'd love to. So we are using assessment data, so TCAP data in English and math. We are using we use CASE benchmark. We're using the benchmark data for these students, then grades, attendance, and discipline. So hopefully that helps. And again, it'll be 5th grade through 8th grade.
Thank you. And then another question about how you all are collaborating with your four-year institutions and community colleges, and how you're asking them to kind of support your efforts. So Shanda, I may turn to you first, because I know you all are doing this work really purposefully through Greater Together, and then LaTanya would love to turn to you to hear how you all are thinking about that in Lauderdale.
Yeah, so we are very purposeful. We have Greater Together meetings once a month. They're virtually normally, but we are in person twice a year, basically. And so we collaborate on everything. Just for purpose of example, right now, obtaining signatures, and in August, every CMCSS senior will receive a letter signed by the president of Austin P, the president of TCAT, and the president of Nashville State, and our new director of schools, that says your child can. Your child's about to graduate, your child can go to college, congratulations, and here's how you would help your child achieve that. So it's just little things like that, where we're all working together to create a community culture that our kids can go to college and our kids can be successful. They come in and support. It's like we all work together, really. It's like we're all in the same office, even though we're not. They come in and help with FAFSA. They come in and help with college applications. They help support financially even our college application event. So everything we do, they're right there. I just ask. When I ask, they always say yes. So it's a great partnership.
I love that. That's really inspiring to see kind of everyone stacking hands and doing whatever it takes for students. LaTanya, anything additional you would share in that front of how you all are working with post-secondary partners?
Some of the very same things, and also our dual enrollment and our career academies that we're working on for this upcoming fall, so that some of our students who are not planning to do the full 2-year degree program, they will actually begin to do some of the diploma programs through Dyersburg State. Also the same through TCAT. And then UTM works very closely with us in providing professional development for ACT. Some of our summer melt, Dyersburg State comes out, they host the event so that our students are seeing them often throughout the summer, and just making sure that they keep that college mind going during summertime. So.
Love that. That's really important. Well, I want to say thank you again to our guests, so Dr. Duser, Dr. Raff, Dr. Doty, and Ms. Jackson, for sharing their reflections and strategies for implementing the momentum metrics. I know I personally am really inspired by the work you all have done to improve post-secondary preparation access, and then ultimately success, which is what we're all working toward. And as we prepare for the upcoming school year, we know this work is more important than ever. I think that data from THEC is really sticking with me, and we've got some work to do to make sure that our students are able to have that seamless transition. So as we conclude, I'd like to share a couple of resources that the SCORE team is going to share with you in a follow-up email in the next couple of days. So in addition to a link to a recording of today's webinar, we are also going to share the ESG Momentum Metrics page and Resource Hub, as well as SCORE's Community Data Playbook and Summer Melt Report. And then, as we mentioned at the top, THEC's new Collegegoing report, we will link to that as well. There's a lot of really good data in that. So I look forward to hearing from everyone who attended this webinar. As we emerge from the pandemic, we really have a critical window of opportunity to not just go back to the way things were, but really rebuild and reimagine how we can prepare all students for post-secondary success. I'm grateful for the hard work and thoughtfulness that you're each investing to ensure that our students are successful after high school, because we know how important that is to their long-term economic independence. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for the work you do every single day for students. Have a great rest of the week.